Right, thank you. Metaxas was born in Ithaca in 1871 and finished high school in Kefalonia in 1885. Ithaca and Kefalonia are two islands in the Ionian Sea on the western coast of Greece. Metaxas originated from a noble family of the lower Ionian Sea, and who were endowed with the title of Count by the Venetians. The Venetians ruled the Ionian Islands for 3 centuries. Therefore, Metaxas considered himself as part of the aristocracy. That's a critical point for us to understand his personality. His idol was Count Ioannis Kapodistrias, Greece's first governor, back in 1828 to 1831. We'll see a picture of Count Kapodistrias later on. Naturally, Metaxas's aristocratic origins helped him immensely to enter the royal entourage and promote his military and political career. In 1890, Metaxas graduated from the Hellenic Army Academy cum laude and joined the Royal Engineers Corps. It was a soft corps. In 1997, he had light duties, let's say, as an engineer, a royal engineer. In 1997, at the beginning of the Greco-Turkish War, Metaxas was introduced to Crown Prince Constantine and gained his trust. He was sent for training to the War Academy in Berlin as a royal trustee. In 1903, Metaxas returned to Athens and was posted at the Army High Command. A year later, he joined the newly found Chiefs of Staff. You can easily say that he was privileged. In 1909, his royalist leadings, though, took a toll on him. After a coup d'etat of liberal-minded officers, that year he was exiled away from Athens to a provincial guard at the back end of Greece. We can move on to the next slide. Thank you. In 1910, at the beginning of the second decade of the 20th century, Metaxas was recalled to Athens by Eleftherios Venizelos, a rising political leader at the time, and he was appointed as his chief aide-de-camp and military counselor. However, the relationship between the two ambitious men, the royal soldier Ioannis Metaxas and the liberal-minded political leader, Eleftherios Venizelos, that we all know, I suppose, was uneasy and it was going to be very short-lived. In 1912 to 1913, Metaxas took an active role in the planning and the conduct of the Balkan Wars as military attaché in Sofia, and thereafter as a member of the Chiefs of Staff of the Hellenic Army. He shared with King Constantine the glory of the surrender of Salonika on the 26th of October 1912 and the surrender of Ioannina on the 21st of February in 1913. In December 1914, in the next year, Metaxas became acting commander-in-chief of the Hellenic Army. In fact, his highest military position ever to be. In February next year, Metaxas and Venizelos fell out. Metaxas objected strongly to Venizelos' plan for a new war with Turkey, this time in Smyrna, in Asia Minor, and resigned from his high command position. In 1920, after 3 years in exile, Metaxas refused to take part in the Asia Minor campaign and resigned finally from his office in the army. He retired as a lieutenant general. In 1922, in the immediate aftermath of the Asia Minor debacle of Greece, General Metaxas founded his own political party, the so-called Free Thinkers' Party, Koma των Ελευθεροφρόνων. This way, he started his career as a politician and a party leader. Let's move on to the next slide. In 1923, Metaxas participated in a failed military coup d'etat against the liberal-leaning government and sought asylum in Italy. He spent another year there. In 1924, Metaxas recognized the Republican form of government, the Second Greek Republic, that was established that year, received amnesty by the Republican government and returned back to Greece. 2 years later, in 1926, his political party gained almost 16% of the votes in the general elections and joined a coalition government. In 1926 to 1928, for about 2 years, Metaxas held the portfolios of transport and justice in the coalition Republican government. In 1928, Venizelos, Metaxas' arch-enemy, as I said, returned triumphantly to power. In 1932, the world economic crisis broke out and reached Greece, and Greece's default foreshadowed Venizelos' downfall from power that year. The two men, Metaxas and Venizelos, clashed in parliament in 1932. In 1934, Metaxas made a U-turn against the Republic. In June 1935, Metaxas championed the restoration of the monarchy at the general elections. In November of that year, King George returned to Greece after a military coup staged by another very successful indeed putschist, General Kondylis. In April 1936, Metaxas was finally appointed Prime Minister by King George under pressure by the army. He had many friends in the army. On the 4th of August 1936, as you all know, King George II suspended the constitution and Metaxas announced a big change in the form of his government. Let's move to some photos and then to the next slide. You can see on the left General Ioannis Metaxas at a later age. Next to him, King George II, Metaxas receiving the fascist salute underneath, the Roman salute, by his henchmen. And on the right, you can see the figure of Theologos Nikoloudis, Metaxas' Minister of Propaganda, a very obscure personality indeed. Let's move to the next slide, and let me share with you a few words on the ideological profile of Metaxas and his dictatorship, the so-called 4th of the August government. The first ideological setting that is identified with Metaxas as personality and his regime is, of course, nationalism. Metaxas was by and large a nationalist like all other military men of his time. Metaxas took an active part in the Balkan Wars of 1912-1913 as a staff officer of King Constantine. He played, slide before that, slide before that. Yes, that's it. Thank you. He played a crucial role in the diplomacy and the operational conduct of the war in the Balkans. I've already mentioned a few things earlier. At the end of the two wars in the Balkans in October 1913, Metaxas was awarded the Golden Cross of the Redeemer by King Constantine. Metaxas remained, after Greece's debacle in Asia Minor in 1922, Metaxas' opinions on politics, strategy, and the war changed profoundly. Metaxas remained hesitant towards war and inimical to revisionism and any other form of aggression for most of the interwar period and his political career. His seizure of power in 1936 didn't change his mind. However, the downfall of economic and political liberalism in Europe in the mid-1930s, and in Greece, of course, signaled a significant turn of his towards nationalism, a new turn. In 1935, to be more precise, in an article in Kathimerini, Kathimerini is the flagship, or was the flagship of the conservative press at the time, Metaxas accused Venizelos that he had crushed the national ideal, namely the Greek great idea, as we usually call it, and he had spread the theory that Greece cannot hope for any more territory beyond the limits of the free state of Hellenism. Therein, Metaxas, in that article, called for a national revival and the restitution of Greek civilization to its ancient glory. This duty, the national revival, lay naturally on the shoulders of the new generation, that is the youth. This article was the blueprint of his ideology of the third Greek civilization, the rebirth of ancient Greece in another form. Let's move to the next slide. Monarchism, another fundamental tenet of Metaxas's personality. Metaxas was profoundly and innately a royalist in his mind, and the crown overshadowed the nation. His devotion to the idea of the monarchy was stronger indeed than his national feelings. In 1900, Metaxas, while still studying at the War Academy in Berlin, he wrote in his diary the following lines that you read on this slide in italics. It is irrelevant to me whether the king is good or bad, useful or pernicious. I do not examine whether his actions do good or cause damage to the nation, Metaxas wrote. I follow him blindly to whatever he wants, he continues writing. His wish is my command, he ends his phrase. And he ends his entry in his diary, this entry, by saying, and I consider him, meaning the king, to be the icon of the homeland as well as of the past, the present, and the future of the nation. More or less, the crown stood above the nation in Metaxas's mind. Monarchism lay at the core of his ideology, that's out of the question. Metaxas's monarchism was founded on his personal connection, on the, we have to comment on that, to be fair. It was founded on something very practical and personal, on his personal connection with King Constantine. His devotion to the crown was a form of gratitude, I will say. In 1938, for that reason, during his 4-year dictatorship, the Greek cities were actually inundated with busts and statues of King Constantine. We can see the next slide. A statue of King Constantine in downtown Athens. That is actually the work of an Italian sculptor, Francesco Parisi, to be more precise. Metaxas's monarchism drew also on his aristocratic origins. He implicitly identified himself repeatedly with Count Capodistrias, as I said, another Ionian aristocrat named Ioannis, who drew his titles from the Venetians, and was the first governor of independent Greece back in 1928 to 1931. We see his portrait here. Comis, Count Ioannis Capodistrias. The periodicals of Metaxas's regime, all his mouthpieces, especially the periodical The New State, το νέον κράτος, contain plentiful, numerous articles on Ioannis Capodistrias and the story of his government. Let's move to another slide, the third ideological setting in a row, agrarianism, and I will add here the word corporatism, corporatist-like form of agrarianism. I'm explaining myself right immediately. Metaxas fully understood that in the modern era of mass politics, it was more than imperative that every single regime must be infused with a great dose of socialism, populism, and agrarianism for its own good and survival. Thus, his political party, the so-called Free Thinkers' Party, that was modeled on an Austrian conservative party, appeared in its program as the agent of the people and defender of the group interests and ideology of the agrarian and petit bourgeois class, as well the defender of the reasonable, that is, the loyal part of the workers' class. At the same time, Metaxas' party's manifesto clarified from its very beginning, that it was not a party of the capitalists, but of the lower classes. It mostly vowed allegiance to the farmers, who at the time were 60% of Greece's total population. Hence, its logo was the spike, that is the upper and grain-bearing part of the wheat plant. In 1936 to 1939, while firmly in power, Metaxas placed particular emphasis on the rural nature of his new Greece that was in progress. Drawing on Mussolini's campaign, Ruralizzare l'Italia, officially launched in Italy in 1928, Metaxas' aim was to ruralize Greece, that is, to radically curtail, firstly and mostly, but not only, to radically curtail the flow of peasants to the cities and to reverse urbanization along Italian lines. In the longue durée, Metaxas aimed at the creation also of a Volksgemeinschaft, epicentered on the people, mainly the farmers and the workers. His Volksgemeinschaft as a project, namely, as he worded, the people as a whole body, admittedly was a national socialist idea drawn on German lines. The central ideas of this ideal society will be camaraderie and unity. His national youth organization was modeled on this ideal and was supposed to be the blueprint of this future society. Therein, the children, in the words of his mouthpieces, in that society, the children of the worker, the farmer, the educated and the rich will be standing side by side and working harmonically together for the benefit of the entire society and not only for one of its parts. Let's move to the next slide. Another setting of Metaxas' ideological mindset was, of course, anti-Marxism. Metaxas, who was exiled in Italy twice, in 1917 to 1920 and again in 1922 to 1923, experienced, first of all, the Biennio Rosso while exiled there. The protests, the strikes and the rallies in northern Italy shocked him deeply. In October 1920, he wrote in his diary that the socialist tyranny has become unbearable. In his article in Kathimerini, about 15 years later, in 1935, Metaxas deplored particularly the fact that leftism, regardless of its vague and nebulous content, had become a fashion among the youth in Greece. As a military man, Metaxas detested communists, Marxists, and the notion of the class struggle. In his mind, the social revolution that was methodically organized by Moscow's communism was premeditated. First and foremost, communism for Metaxas was a pretext of prime importance for the establishment and the justification of his regime on the 4th of August 1936. The suspension of the Constitution and the sine die dissolution of the Parliament on that day were officially presented as a way to relieve the country of the anarchy of communism, which was engineering behind the scenes the social revolution. The deep change in the form of government on the 4th of August 1936 was meant to free Greece of the tyranny of the demagogues, meaning the liberals, and the subversive anarchical elements, meaning the members of the Communist Party. We see on this slide on the top left-hand corner a regiment of Metaxas' National Youth Organization parading in Athens. Underneath it, the front pages of 3 issues of Metaxas' mouthpiece to the youth, a periodical called I Neolea, meaning the youth. On the front page of the issue that I placed in the center, you can see a farmer plowing his piece of land. The farmer had, as I said, a prominent place in his ideology. It was very germane, the image of the farmer and the rural vision of Greece in Metaxas' ideology. On the right side of this slide, you can notice the logo of Metaxas' National Youth Organization, the double-edged Minoan axe that copied the Italian Fasci Littorio. You can see it on the banner of the organization. What is particular in this logo is the crown that stems on the top of this double-edged Minoan axe. Let's move to the last slide of my presentation. Last but not least, another parameter of Metaxas' ideology was, of course, fascism and Nazism. Evidently, Metaxas' new state copied several ideas, notions, and practices, mostly from Mussolini's Italy and Hitler's Germany. The Roman salute that you saw in a picture, the double Minoan axe, the regime's symbol, which resembled the Facilitorio, and its identification, at least in name, with Salazar's Estado Novo, are a few of the many characteristics that crossed Metaxas' new state, το νέον κράτος, with a generic fascism around Europe. Panagiotis Vatikiotis, a Greek-American historian and writer of a political biography of General Metaxas back in 1998, it seems ages ago now this year, argues that being influenced by fascism and fascist ideas is not in itself tantamount to being a fascist. Since there was no social background for a fascist regime in Greece, then since there were hardly any fascists in Greece before the 4th of August of 1936, nor did fascism in Greece have a prominent or even a disguised theoretician or ideologue before that date, Vatikiotis comes to the conclusion that Metaxas' regime was actually a popular autocracy and not a fascist dictatorship. Fascism in Greece was not more than a quest for a more regimental and disciplined society, this Anglo-American historian concludes. In my opinion now, the self-styled 4th of August regime between 1936 and 1941 was a fascist-like regime with totalitarian tendencies that actually never reached the stage of fully fledged fascism. Historical, political, ideological, as well as structural socioeconomic reasons account majorly for this development or non-development. The story, though, of Metaxas' government is still open to research and debate. That's all from my part. Thank you very much for your attention.